The Supreme Court allows for immigration ICE stops to continue in Los Angeles. California joins Hawaii, Oregon, and Washington in some sort of West Coast health alliance in a snub to RFK Jr. And a Green Party socialist enters the gubernatorial race for California next year. All that and more coming up on this episode of the California Underground Podcast, starting right now. What's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the California Underground Podcast, the most trusted podcast for all things California politics. I am your host, Phil. We got a lot to get to tonight, including a recent SCOTUS ruling that just came hot off the presses yesterday, a health alliance based on science, according to California, but we'll take a look at their track record with believing in the science, and also a Green Party socialist who has some unique ideas, but we're going to get into that a little bit later. So before we get started, make sure if you haven't already to like, subscribe, share. All that stuff helps with the algorithm. And as always, joining me is my trusty co-host, the best, the fastest researcher in the West, Camille. How are you doing, Camille?
I am good. Thank you. How are you?
Good. Well, we got a lot to get to tonight, so I guess we should get started on the first story, which is this West Coast Health Alliance. We have a video about it that California, Oregon, Hawaii, and Washington have joined because, as they said in their words, they believe in the science. And that's what they want to really believe in, is the science of health and all that. They don't like what RFK and the CDC is saying. So we'll hop right into that video, and then we can discuss afterwards.
A clash between health and politics sparking headlines tonight on both coasts. This morning, California, Oregon, and Washington announced plans to issue their own vaccination guidelines, saying they fear federal health directives are both too lax and too political under the Trump administration. Coincidentally, it comes on the same day Florida announced it will work to drop all vaccine mandates for its residents. NBC Bay Area's Robert Honda joining us live from the newsroom with a closer look at what this all means. Robert.
Well, what Florida is doing and what California, Oregon, and Washington are doing are believed to be separate actions, but both are likely to create new challenges and confusion for health departments, vaccine providers, and most important, people. Calling themselves the West Coast Health Alliance, California, Oregon, and Washington announced today they're preparing to issue their own vaccine recommendations in the face of President Trump's mass firing of CDC doctors and scientists. Less than an hour later, Florida's health officials announced plans to end all vaccination mandates in their state. The governors of all three western states issued a joint statement on their decision, saying, "We will not allow the people of our states to be put at risk," stating the CDC has become a political tool that peddles ideology instead of science. A health officer.
It's kind of ironic that they are now saying the CDC peddles ideology and not science. It's almost like we forgot what happened 5 years ago, I guess, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit. I guess they don't like this science, yes, which somehow is political, but...
For Contra Costa County told NBC Bay Area she believes the new alliance can help alleviate public fear and confusion.
I think the alliance is going to help us here at the local level to help guide our community members with what they can do. Certainly Contra Costa Health continues to support vaccines. We continue to recommend vaccination. Vaccines are safe, they're effective, and our goal is really to make sure that our community members have what they need to stay safe.
Dr. Peter Chin Hong, a dean and infectious disease specialist at UCSF, also applauded the West Coast Coalition, saying he believes it will boost public health and health workers' morale.
Decisions are being made by people who have not been vetted appropriately and don't have the same expertise, so that it kind of gives us balance to that. And again, it is, as a healthcare worker myself, somewhat, resets my compass, gives me some fuel to move forward rather than feeling so utterly demoralized for the last few weeks.
He said utterly demoralized. He was utterly demoralized by the CDC and RFK. So he's happy.
I am not saying that he is not an expert or anything like that. I just don't know what the heck just came out of his mouth.
He sounds like he's in touch with his feelings about how he was utterly demoralized because of you have Robert RFK Jr. as the helm of the HHS secretary. So they don't like the CDC. Basically, these
Right.
West Coast states don't like it. So got a couple seconds left. We'll finish it up.
Health officials nationwide are also already raising red flags about both the Florida and California decision, saying the contradictory messages could fuel confusion and create issues over insurance coverage for those looking to get vaccinated. At this point, all they can say is,
all right.
Ooh,
if it sounds like you're living in Twilight Zone, it kind of does feel like that. First off, welcome to everybody in the chat. So there was somebody who asked a question. There was a ban on enforcing immigration. No, actually quite the opposite. We're going to get to that story next that actually allows for enforcing immigration. And what's up, Vallejo, California? It's funny how they were now, because they don't believe in the CDC, it's not the gospel truth, the CDC anymore, but 5 years ago, everything that came out of the CDC was as if it was the gospel truth in a golden rule that you had to listen to because it was based on science. But now, because RFK Jr. is in there, and obviously you have President Trump at the helm, the CDC is not to be trusted. You can't listen to the CDC anymore. It's not based in science. That's their whole thing now. They don't believe that the CDC and their recommendations are based in science or true medical science. I don't know. What are your thoughts after seeing that video that they don't believe in the CDC anymore, these West Coast states?
I just want to take a quick moment to remind everybody that the first COVID vaccinations came out under Trump, and people were willing to take those. Right. That was kind of my line. I was like, oh, really? You're going to trust the Trump vaccine? I think a lot of people were saying that too. But okay. I think it's so very important that we clarify that there is a huge, huge difference between anti-vax and vaccine mandate. Especially so I'm a parent, in case y'all haven't picked up on that. I mention it every week. I'm a parent. That's definitely one decision that you really do have to think about when you have children, because they do give them certain vaccines at birth too. And of course, they, when you're a pregnant woman, they offer you the flu vaccines first. Like pregnancy apparently is something that affects you negatively, and therefore you're like part of the crowd that needs the any vaccines, flu vaccines, whatever first. So I personally, when I first started having kids nearly 20 years ago, was not anti-vaccine. I was just like, I want to take time to research each vaccine and space them out. That was my belief. And that is not the same as being anti-vax. And regardless of what my beliefs are today, my beliefs are that you're the parent, you and your partner, husband, spouse, whatever, and your doctor need to make those decisions for your kids. You and your doctor need to make that decision for yourself. That is a huge difference between so the Florida decision is not saying vaccines are no longer available. We're throwing them out. They're in the ocean. Good luck swimming with the sharks to get one.
They're
that's not what they did.
Alligator Alcatraz with all the alligators.
Yeah. No, they were like, we're just not going to require them because this should be a decision, for adults and children, but they're like, we're not going to require them for school because this should be a decision between you and your doctor of what's best for your child. And I definitely agree with that. Now, this West Coast Health Alliance, I don't see anything bad about this unless they're somehow going to, here's what I question is, what science are they following if not the CDC? Because the CDC has been our god of science for so many years. And so what science exactly are they following? And if they're going to have new science and form their own West Coast CDC version, then are they going to tax us for that? And that's my question. And where's this going? Because otherwise, them having an alliance and they all line up and they're like, yeah, this is the schedule that we believe in and we recommend. That's not terrible, that's not awful, that's not evil. But if this is you can't do anything without these vaccines and require passports, and we're having our own department and you're all paying for it, then obviously I'm highly opposed to that. But something that is interesting is that Hawaii, the state of Hawaii, for K through 12 students, they have their list of required vaccines to go to school, and they have like a 3-month period where they're like the first 3 months of school, I guess, like if they are not up to date on the vaccines, it's okay. But after 3 months, that's when they will be like, no, the student can no longer attend. I believe Oregon, Hawaii, California, and Washington are all like, no, on like first day of school, you have to be compliant with the vaccines. But why is this like 3-month period? And why the kids can still carry things? And then, I'm sorry, I'm going really long-winded here, but I'm just kind of bringing up random points. Undocumented immigrants are not required to follow vaccine schedules in California. They don't have to get vaccines. They were not mandated to get the vaccines when they were trying to mandate them in California in 2020, or 2021 back then. And then I think I had another point and I just lost my train of thought. Oh, what I talked to you earlier, people who live on the tribal land, they're considered sovereign nations, and they also do not have to follow any of the California health schedules, vaccine schedules. It's up to them to make their own health guidelines. So where's the science? The science doesn't change over a fence. The science doesn't change over a border. We're always learning new science, and science is improving, but it literally doesn't, like my next door neighbor and the science is the same for us. So this is where I just go, what are we even doing?
Yeah, it's ironic that their whole thing is we don't want to make it political, but we're absolutely making it political because we don't like RFK Jr. and we don't like Trump, and we think what they're doing. And because Florida did this, because Florida got rid of vaccine mandates, now we are going to create a West Coast alliance and put out our own vaccine mandates. But does it have the effect of, well, the CDC, and that, we're getting into a whole weird area of like Orwellian kind of groupthink where the CDC recommendations were not law. And that was always the biggest thing that people were saying, is that the CDC kept coming out with these recommendations. Oh, this is a recommendation. We recommend you get vaccinated. We recommend vaccine mandates that people can't go anywhere without them. They weren't law. They didn't have the effect of law. So states had to kind of implement it. So without that sort of legal authority, I guess I'm not sure really what this is supposed to do besides a bunch of West Coast doctors and public health bureaucrats who come out with their idea of what science is. Because I thought, and this is more ironic, that they said, well, they always said the science is settled. This is the science. You have to believe in the science. But the science changes. Like science changes. Science always has to be prodded and always kind of examined and looked back on and said, did we get the science right? Does it need to be corrected? So they are both thinking, they both 5 years ago said the science is infallible. And we have to listen to everything that the CDC says because the science is settled. Everything, the CDC, we have to get vaccine mandates. We have to do social distancing. We have to mask up. This is the science. And people will love to kind of crow about how, well, I believe in science and I believe in science. And we're going to get to in a minute. There's a little rundown I came up with about the science that they talked about 5 years ago. And now they're saying because the science evolved and you have RFK Jr. in there who has a different view of the science, they go, oh, well, now we can't listen to that science. That's different science. So it is absolutely 100% political. And it is like that last guy who was so emotional, he was demoralized. I think that's more of a doctor who's talking it like through his feelings, not necessarily through a scientific or professional lens. It seems like he's more upset about the politics of what's going on in DC. And I agree with you on the idea of like vaccine mandates is where, because I believe you should be free to do whatever you want. If you want to take a vaccine, go ahead and take a vaccine. You want to be anti-vax, go ahead and be anti-vax. It's a free country. You shouldn't be forced to do anything you do or do not want to do. And actually, I found this old Cal Matters article. Let me just pull it up real quick. So this was from 2022. Now, if you remember 2022, we were still in some sort of COVID lockdown because California and Gavin Newsom just didn't want to give up on the lockdowns. And if you remember, we had covered this back then. There was a slate of bills called like the vaccine bills, where it was they had like 5 bills that they wanted to introduce. Who was it? I'm trying to remember his name. Dr. Richard Pan. That's who it was. He was on his way out, so he was like, I'm just going to introduce a crap ton of vaccine mandate bills. And Cal Matters came out with this op-ed that said, mandates for vaccine that does not block transmission are discriminatory. They force unvaccinated individuals to comply in order to attend school or keep their job. This is discrimination by coercion. Vaccinated individuals are likely to spread vital particles as unvaccinated people, yet their activities are not restricted. The reasoning behind these mandates is not supported by current science-based data. So even then, in 2022, it changed so rapidly that they were making laws and mandates in California, or trying to. Dr. Richard Pan was trying to create like this vaccine group of bills. And between 2021 and 2022, the science had already changed, and vaccine mandates made no sense anymore because people could transmit it. So it is kind of interesting that they believed that the science was infallible in 2020 and 2021, and then now they think it's very fallible and that they can disagree with it. So I don't know. I found it an interesting story because it just seems like it's another thing that California is doing specifically because of politics. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think California especially manages to take almost anything and make it political. And then they author a series of bills on it to try to turn it into law. And you can probably speak to this more than I can. And I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but this is where I could see this going, is that they're not going to allow other people to travel to these states if they're not compliant with what they come up with is the science and recommended vaccines. Like I could just see them. I mean, I know we really need the tourist travel here, but I could just see them being like, nope, you can't cross into our state lines because you don't have your up-to-date X, Y, and Z vaccine. You didn't get your DTaP booster, whatever. But yes, to your point too, going back to the Cal Matters article, remember initially when the vaccines came out, they insisted that if you got the series of vaccines, you would never get COVID again, and you couldn't transmit it. And then that changed because people were like, got my 16th booster, and here I am with COVID for the 50th time. And I didn't know I had COVID, and I went to work and everyone in my office got sick because of me. Why didn't my 16 booster work? That was weird. It was weird times. Like I told you when I was reading the notes, I'm like, oh my gosh, PTSD of COVID. And I don't want to go down that line because I know that they're talking about, like, in case of future outbreaks, they want to be able to mandate them. But again, that's where we're just rushing through a vaccine and who is the science. And so that's where I see them forming their own department that we're going to be taxed to death on, like we aren't already taxed to death on everything else.
So in terms of the changing science, and this was the point that I found ironic about how they believed in the science. These are all the states that believed in the science. We follow the science here in California, in Oregon, and Washington. And these are the things we all know that they implemented and that they pushed, especially here in California. They pushed all of this stuff. And I wanted to take a look at a rundown of, and here, these are just from my notes. We'll start with the mask mandates. This is from my notes. It says, while masks, especially high-quality ones like N95s, reduce transmission in controlled settings, real-world compliance and effectiveness varied. A 2021 Vox article noted clear evidence that masks work, but enforcement challenges and public fatigue dilute their impact. By 2023, California ended their mask mandates in high-risk settings like healthcare facilities, reflecting a shift of the virus became less and severe immunity can grow. Critics, including some scientists, argue that universal mask mandates were less justified for vaccinated populations or low transmission periods. And then it goes on to show that there was diminishing returns. And then it was later found out that most of these cloth masks, the ones that everyone was wearing, didn't really do anything anyway, and that they didn't block the particles that we were looking for. So mask mandates were found to not be as effective as they were expecting to, unless you were walking around with some big complicated mask that even then still was not transmission proof. Again, these were all based on the science of this stuff absolutely works. If you mask, it absolutely blocks transmission. If you get a vaccine, it absolutely blocks transmission. School closures. Evidence emerged that children were less likely to suffer severe outcomes or drive community spread. So this whole idea that they had to close schools because children would get sick, even though children were least prone to COVID. A 2023 EdSource article noted that only 92 pediatric deaths in California by 2023, suggesting closures may have been disproportionate to the risk. Studies showed significant learning loss and mental health impacts, which I'm sure kids are still dealing with to this day, leading to debate over whether closures were justified. By 2022, Orange County superintendents called for easing school mask mandates, citing low hospitalization rates and global trends toward endemicity. The state's delay in reopening schools compared to other states fueled criticism that decisions were driven by political pressure rather than science. And we all know that it was probably the California Teachers Association who was behind it. Actually, we know for a fact, because we reported on it, how they were basically holding kids ransom and holding the schools ransom for all these, like, it was like some absurd amount of money they wanted us to spend in tax dollars, like refurbishing the schools. It was like $100 billion or something. They were like, we need to basically spend like $100 or $200 billion like refurbishing the schools.
Yeah, I'm not going back to school until there's a Starbucks. Not literally. Sorry, that was sarcasm. I don't want anyone to think that actually happened, but it's kind of how it felt. It was like, it wasn't about the kids and the science. It was about their demands of comfort and upgrades.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, vaccine mandates. A 2022 Cal Matters article, which we had just cited to, it reduced severe illness but not significantly blocked transmission, especially with Omicron variants, which was the least kind of deadly, I guess you could say. By the time we got to Omicron, I think everyone knew that this was now becoming just sort of another flu virus. This undermined the rationale for mandates, as unvaccinated individuals were not uniquely responsible for spread. A 2024 federal court ruling revived a lawsuit against Los Angeles school mandates, knowing that vaccines primarily mitigate symptoms, not prevent spread, suggesting a lack of legal basis for coercion. The student vaccine mandate was quietly dropped in 2023, as it was deemed unnecessary with declining transmission and complete FDA approval for younger children. Critics argue that the mandates ignored natural immunity, which studies showed as protective as vaccination for some. So, again, going back to this is the science. It's settled. If you get a vaccine, it just stops transmission. Anthony Fauci said it. Joe Biden said it. Kamala Harris said it. Just get your vaccine and it'll stop transmission. The science rapidly changed. It turned out you got your vaccine and you were still spreading it. And then they were saying people who got COVID should still get the vaccine, which turned out to be also false, because people who had natural immunity had just as much immunity as those who were vaccinated. So for them in the end, I guess my point is this, is that for a group of states that said they believe in the science and that they want to point out, this is all about the science and we got to support the science. Well, you weren't really all about the science 5 years ago. So, and you didn't want to acknowledge the science 5 years ago. So again, this just seems like it's political, and yeah, you're doing this because you want to snub your nose at RFK Jr. and the CDC. So any final thoughts on their new West Coast alliance? I'd be interested to see how far this goes, or is this just kind of like symbolic?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. Are they just virtue signaling yet again? Remember, California was supposed to have had our own insulin made here in the state through that contract the $10 million, $100 million contract with Civica RX. And we were supposed to have a facility, and that was supposed to be done by like now. we're nowhere near that. So I don't even know what this alliance is going to do for science. We'll see. Those are my final thoughts on it, because otherwise we could go down this hill forever of PTSD, COVID.
I don't want to relive COVID. PTSD.
We don't need to go there.
Just another example of them thumbing their nose at the administration. All right, next story, which I think people are going to get a real kick out of, is the Supreme Court came out with a ruling literally yesterday. We actually had to swap out a story at the last minute. The Supreme Court lifted an injunction that banned the Trump administration and ICE from doing immigration stops. So we're going to watch the video. The nerd that I am, I read the whole ruling by Brett Kavanaugh, so we'll dive into a little bit of that. We'll try not to bore everybody. Camille, I'm sure you'll have questions, and I will do my best to answer them from a Supreme Court perspective or a lawyer perspective, but let's jump into this clip.
The nation's highest court sides with the Trump administration. Another big story today, clearing the way for federal agents to carry out sweeping immigration enforcement again. Welcome to the Fox 11 News at 5 simulcast on our sister station, Fox 11 Plus. I'm Christine Devine. So LA's Mayor Karen Bass stood united with several community leaders outside the Westlake Home Depot today. They were condemning the Supreme Court's decision. That's where we find Fox 11's Rachel Aragon with the story. Rachel?
Now, several top LA city leaders stood outside this very Home Depot in Westlake. A reminder, it's one of several stores that was targeted by federal agents earlier this month and last month. We also know, though, after today's big Supreme Court ruling, it's prompting more concerns and fears about these raids continuing.
We will not allow the Supreme Court or anyone to divide us.
Outrage and a promise to fight back. The message from LA Mayor Karen Bass after the country's highest court's decision allowing federal agents to continue sweeping immigration operations.
Did I see Home Depot signs in the back of that? I gotta go back.
I don't know, but isn't that what they said? Was they were in front of a Home Depot?
It's funny that there's a Home Depot sign there, because Home Depot, the CEO or owner of Home Depot, is one of like the biggest Trump supporters. So it is interesting that they had Home Depot signs. I don't think the owner of Home Depot would appreciate that, but
so they're like supporting, like they're like holding, we stand with Home Depot, not with.
Yeah,
like,
and Home Depot is always, like, the owner of Home Depot is very pro-Trump, so it is interesting that they're trying to be like, oh, well, we stand with the people who are working outside Home Depot or standing outside Home Depot.
Allowing federal agents to continue sweeping immigration operations in Los Angeles using race or language as a basis to stop people.
Law enforcement cannot racially profile and discriminate against Latinos, against Angelenos based on their race.
From Home Depots to car washes, over the last 3 months, the federal immigration raids in the LA area have made some fearful to continue or find work.
Approximately 247 car wash workers have disappeared from our communities. This is just unacceptable.
It's a daily fear in our community. People aren't going to church, aren't going to work in many cases.
Ron Goches, a community organizer and teacher in South Los Angeles, says after Monday's ruling, he plans to continue conducting community patrols.
What we try to do is we try to locate ICE activity before they strike so that we can warn our community so they have a chance to defend themselves.
In a social media post, the Department of Homeland Security calling the Supreme Court's decision a victory, adding DHS will continue to arrest and remove the criminal illegal aliens that the mayor of LA is protecting. But top city leaders say they're not backing down despite Monday's decision.
From the beginning, we have known that Los Angeles has been used as a test case for total dominance and unchecked power by the federal government.
And earlier today, Mayor Bass also adding, she says she has taken several steps in response to all this. As one example, she said she filed a Freedom of Information request to get more answers from the federal government as to where and why people are being taken away. We're live in Westlake. Rachel Aragon, back to you.
All right. Karen Bass, probably most thankful about this issue because, well, it takes away from the fact that she's managed that city into the ground and no one kind of asked her about what's going on with the wildfires and rebuilding the Palisades. But, I guess when you can deflect as a politician, that's the most important thing. So,
yes, talk about unchecked powers.
Yeah. I wanted to get into the ruling of this. And again, if anybody has any questions in the chat about what Brett Kavanaugh is saying, I'll do my best to kind of decipher what the Supreme Court is saying in this ruling. And for me, as the legal nerd that I am, whenever there's a Supreme Court ruling, good or bad, I guess, if you believe in it or not, I always go straight to the ruling because a lot of times it explains what their rationale is. Maybe sometimes I don't agree with it, but it explains it. Like I think I was saying to you before about how like people always go after like Amy Coney Barrett and they say like she's a traitor and she's not MAGA or anything. I'm like, okay, first off, Supreme Court justices aren't MAGA or supposed to be Republican. They're non-political. But always when you read it, you might get a better idea of where they're coming from. They're not voting like congressmen. They're not like, oh, we're on team red or team blue. We have to vote for the Trump administration. Right. But in this case, the 6 conservative justices did side with the ruling or concurring opinion, which was presented by Brett Kavanaugh. So this is from the Supreme Court of the United States. I'll do my best to kind of just go through it and not bore everyone to death. Goes on to say illegal immigration is especially pronounced in Los Angeles area. Among other locales in the United States, about 10% of the people in the Los Angeles region are illegally in the United States, meaning about 2 million illegal immigrants out of a population of 20 million. That's a big number. I think that's a pretty big number. Not surprisingly, given those extraordinary numbers, U.S. immigration officers have prioritized immigration enforcement in the Los Angeles area. Immigration stops based on reasonable suspicion of illegal presence have been an important component of U.S. immigration enforcement for decades across several presidential administrations. In this case, however, the district court enjoined U.S. immigration officers from making investigative stops in the Los Angeles area when the stops are based on the following factors or combination of factors. 1, presence at particular locations such as bus stops, car washes, day labor pickup sites, agricultural sites, and the like. 2, the type of work one does. 3, speaking Spanish or speaking English with an accent. And 3, apparent race or ethnicity. They go on to say the Los Angeles area issue here is the Central District, which includes LA, Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, Orange, Riverside, and that's a big area, San Bernardino. So that's a lot of people in that area. We're going to, we'll skip past the standing because that's not really that interesting. So pulling back for a second, like what they're talking about here, and this is why it's important you actually read the ruling, not just listen to what these like crowing heads say on the news. There's a difference between when law enforcement can stop you for probable cause or reasonable suspicion. And reasonable suspicion, which they say right here, is a lesser requirement than probable cause and, quote, considerably short of the preponderance of the evidence standard. Whether an officer has reasonable suspicions depends on the totality of the circumstances. So for probable cause, you can detain someone because you believe a crime has been committed. Reasonable suspicion just means law enforcement can kind of like, hey, what's going on here? Like, this is kind of fishy. Like, what happens if they're walking by a house and it sounds like a couple is fighting and a woman screams and there's all this tussling? Is that reasonable suspicion for them to go up and knock on the door and be like, hey, what's going on here? Like, should we check this out? To be clear, apparent ethnicity alone cannot furnish reasonable suspicion under this court's case law regarding immigration stops. However, it can be a, quote, relevant factor when considered along with other salient factors. It goes on to talk about all those other factors. So it is in this case, particularly given the millions of individuals illegally in the United States, the myriad significant economic and social problems caused by illegal immigration, and the government's efforts to prioritize stricter enforcement of the immigration laws enacted by Congress, meaning the balancing of the equities is in favor of the government because they want to enforce immigration law. But the fact remains that under the laws passed by Congress and the president, they are acting illegally by remaining in the United States, at least until Congress and the president chose some legislative approach to legalize some or all of those individuals now illegally present in the country. And by illegally immigrating into the remaining in the country, they are not only violating the immigration laws, but also jumping in front of those non-citizens who follow the rules and wait in line to immigrate into the United States through the legal immigration process. Excuse me. For those reasons, the interest of the illegal immigrants in evading questioning and thus evading detection are not particularly substantial as a legal matter. Any questions while I take a sip of water? Whew.
I do have a question because I just want to clarify. They can't walk up to someone who looks of Mexican descent and say, like, show me that you're a legal citizen. But if that person is perhaps hanging out in front of Home Depot at 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning and is also looks of Mexican descent, then they have reasonable cause to question them. Am I understanding this correctly?
Right. So what they're saying here is it's the totality of the circumstances of, we know it's no secret that there are people who are day laborers and they wait outside a Home Depot in places where those who are here illegally usually congregate to find daily work, where they're going to get paid cash. That is not like some big secret. It's not like they've outsmarted ICE by being like, well, we're just going to hang outside Home Depot. So it's sort of the totality of it. And this is where the dissent, written by Sotomayor, of course, gets it wrong, because she says that, oh, now they're just going to stop every Latino that they see because it's reasonable suspicion. Well, no, that's not what Brett Kavanaugh is saying here. He's not saying that basically if you're Latino that they can stop you. It's you're Latino or you're this specific ethnicity that is known to be here illegally. You're in a place where they know that illegal immigrants congregate to look for work. You don't speak English that well, or you speak Spanish. So it's sort of the totality of everything of, well, this is likely where illegal immigrants are, so we can stop them and ask them what their immigration status is. And that's the reasonable suspicion standard. So it has to be more than just, oh, they're Latino, so we have to question them. And that's the people who are freaking out about this are going to make it sound like that's the whole thing, is that, and even Sotomayor, as Supreme Court Justice, said it's basically legalizing them to stop all Latinos on the street for anything they want.
I wish they had the same energy with the TSA.
Yeah.
I wish they had the same energy with the TSA. Like, wait, even though they're not supposed to be racially profiling, that was kind of how it was established anyway. And so maybe we should get rid of that department because it's racist. Just a thought.
Brett asked, doesn't Terry v. Ohio give them the right to detain these? Terry v. Ohio sounds very familiar from my law school days. You're citing case law that's from for me, 10 years ago. Especially, continuing in the opinion, it says, especially in an immigration case like this one, it's also important to stress the proper role of the judiciary. The judiciary does not set immigration policy or decide enforcement priorities. It should come as no surprise that some administrations may be more laissez-faire in enforcing immigration law, like the Biden administration, and other administrations more strict, like the Trump administration. Article 3 judges may have views on which policy approach is better or fairer, but judges are not appointed to make those policy calls. Oh, geez, where'd that go? Did we jump around? Where'd that go? We lost it. Oh. Somehow I skipped down to the dissent. I'm sorry. We merely ensure... Oh, here we go. But judges are not appointed to make those policy calls. We merely ensure in justiciable cases that the executive branch acts within the confines of the Constitution. Man, why does it keep doing this? And federal statutes, just as... Oh, look, I don't want to read Sotomayor's dissent, okay? See, this is the deep state at work. They want me to read Sotomayor's.
No,
this court...
No.
Oh, no, it won't stay. This court a few years ago declined to step outside our constitutionally assigned role to improperly compel greater executive branch enforcement of the immigration laws, United States v. Texas. We now likewise must decline to step outside our constitutionally assigned role to improperly restrict reasonable executive branch enforcement of the immigration laws. Consistency and neutrality are hallmarks of good judging, and in my view, we abide by those enduring judicial values in this case by granting the stay. So that was Brett Kavanaugh. He got that done in 10 pages. So he got his ruling done, and then Sotomayor went on a 21-page dissent where she said, we should not have to live in a country where the government can seize anyone who looks Latino, speaks Spanish, and appears to work a low-wage job. So that's her whole argument.
Luckily, that's not what it said. So
again, yeah, that's not what it says at all. Obviously, our governor running for president, although he says he's not running for president, we all know he's running for president. He had this to say about this ruling. Of course, he couldn't not say anything. Real Donald Trump's handpicked SCOTUS majority just became the grand marshal for a parade of racial terror in LA. His administration is targeting Latinos and anyone who doesn't look or sound like Stephen Miller's idea of an American to deliberately harm our families and economy. Again, that's not what the ruling said, but okay. Trump's private police force now has a green light to come after your family. Every person is now a target. California will continue to do all we can to fight these abhorrent attacks on Californians. So, like I said,
can't mention something without mentioning Trump.
Like I said, it's important that when these rulings come out that you actually sit down and like read the ruling, because a lot of people will just jump to conclusions about what they think it is. And I mean, it's the reasonable suspicion standard that they can approach people. You can be approached on the street for doing something that looks sketchy. If you're doing something in the middle of the night, like you said, if you were outside of a store loitering around at 2:00 in the morning when that store is closed, a cop has the reasonable suspicion to believe, what are you doing outside this store, and ask, like, what are you doing there? They don't have probable cause to arrest you or stop, but they can at least ask you, like, what's going on. And that's really what this is. What are your thoughts?
I'm still kind of wrapping my head around exactly what this means. I think you clarified it well, but unfortunately, during times like this, there are things that are kind of necessary. Like it looks and sounds awful, but we do know that, okay, like you mentioned, there's 2 million people in Los Angeles alone who have come here illegally. And that doesn't even account for everywhere else. And not all of, they're criminals in the sense that they're here illegally, but not all of them are horrible people. But we do know that a lot of them are committing some pretty horrible crimes. And, they, unfortunately, racial profiling has come into that. And I think that that's sad. I don't know that I agree with the racial profiling, but if I'm out walking my dog and someone said that there was a white woman with brown hair going through mailboxes, and I just happen to be out walking my dog, and they're like, well, there's a white woman walking in the same neighborhood, let's go question her. Was I racially profiled, or was I fitting a description of somebody who was doing something illegal? Like, and so I wouldn't be offended if I got questioned because they're like, well, we got someone fitting your description. Okay, it wasn't me. Like, you'll figure it out. It wasn't me. They'll release me. They'll let me go. I'll go on my way. I wasn't doing anything illegal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
sorry.
Reasonable.
That was really not a very articulate thought.
No, that's reasonable suspicion. That is like, if law enforcement believes there is suspicion to stop you because of something, and standing in the way of basically, the Supreme Court is basically saying here, like, for us to keep the ban in effect, we're basically asking law enforcement to not do their job or to do what they're supposed to do. Yeah, there are administrations who are really aggressive, like the current Trump administration is very aggressive on deportations. I guess when you compare that to the Biden administration, who was not strict at all. I don't know how many people came across the border at that time. Either way, it is the law. And that, Brett Kavanaugh did touch upon something that, again, Democrats always seem to kind of conveniently forget, is that this is actually the law. Like, this is the law of the land. These are the immigration laws. You've been in power how many times in the past 12, 14 years? You've never changed it. So for as much as Democrats always crow about this is unlawful, this is wrong, this is a breach of constitutional freedom, blah, blah, blah. If you don't like it, the point of our government is you can change it. You can change the laws. And if you want it to be more laxed and not what it is now on the books, you could have done that. You were immensely powerful under Barack Obama. You had Joe Biden in office, who would have signed anything you put in front of him. That's how this works. Like, until you fix the laws that are on the books, this is the law. And if there is law enforcement, a special agency that is tasked with enforcing that law, then they have to enforce that law. So we don't get to pick and choose what laws are on the books and say, well, we're not going to listen to this law then, we're not going to listen to this law now, and blah, 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 blah. It's either a law or it's not a law. And we've talked about this a lot in terms of like homelessness and stuff like that. Either it is a law or it's not a law. And either we make exceptions and allow everybody to skirt laws and not pay attention to laws, or we enforce laws. And we are a country of laws. So I think obviously they are going to run with this and make it sound like it's, his private police force is, they call them the Gestapo. The brown shirts will now be out in force going to get all the people. So yeah. Any other final thoughts on this topic?
Well, this is going to sound sarcastic, but going back to the first topic, people who are here illegally, they were very afraid to go get COVID vaccines because they thought like they'll get caught and deported and stuff, even though they were allowed to get vaccinated regardless of their immigration status and all that. And so you have to factor in that these 2 million plus people in one area are likely not vaccinated against most things. That, like, even the vaccines that we've had here forever, they're likely, and I've heard it argued that, oh, they're not actually spreading any of these diseases, but I don't know how we can confidently say that when they're likely not vaccinated. And how do we know that 2 million unvaccinated people, like, no measles vaccines, no chickenpox vaccines, flu shots, all the things, they're not spreading anything, and yet 2 million amongst us somehow. So I do just think it's very interesting what they pick and choose. Is we need to protect these people from being deported, but also we need to make sure that we protect our communities by getting vaccinated, but this group doesn't need to get vaccinated. And I just think that there is a weird little carryover of like, we want this rule when it only applies here, and we only want this rule when it applies here. And so it's just kind of interesting, I guess.
Either we are a country of laws or we are not a country of laws. And that's why faith in institutions is at an all-time low, I think. Speaking of faith in institutions at an all-time low, I don't know if he's new, but he's new to me because I just discovered him the other day. A new candidate has entered the race, and the only reason we're talking about him is because he's so different than all the candidates who are running right now. His name is Butch Ware. He is running on the Green Party ticket, so he is a avowed socialist. I think he's also a doctor of like racial theory or something like that. He's not like a medical doctor. He's a doctor of like education or racial theory or something like that.
PhD. He's a professor.
He's a professor. Yeah, he's not a medical doctor.
African studies, I think, right? Was it African studies? Something like that.
Something like that. Also, by the way, we have new mugs. If you want to say this is our new, we also have it in a t-shirt, which I'm waiting on my t-shirt. So if anybody wants to go, you can go californiaunderground.live, and that's our new one. So we're going to watch a little bit of this. I will preface it with this. he said stuff in this interview. I listened to the actual whole hour and a half because I like one of the guys, the interviewer is James, is really good at like exposing stuff. There is stuff that he said that I'm like, I agree with you on the principle of this. I agree with you that the California Democrats are all bought and paid for by corporate donors, that, you know, Democrats and Republicans have basically been the same party for a long time. I agree with a lot of those principles. And then he gets to his solutions, and then I go, no, I don't agree with your solutions because your solutions are off the wall crazy. So we're going to watch a little bit. Let me know if you want me to stop for any comments or anything. Let's see. I got to figure out where my button is. Here we go.
2%, by the way, in the last
from 120,000 average per night in 2019 to an average now of 182,000 people sleeping on the street every night in a state that has 186 billionaires in it, that has more billionaires than any other state. Now, 25 billion of our money has essentially gone to NGOs and to developers rather than going to the people that are actually on the street. So we see this poverty industrial complex, the middlemen that take a cut off of the top from our tax dollars, and then they're going to buy up a Ramada Inn and turn it into a homeless shelter. But in the meantime, they're going to write themselves a $400,000 a year salary as the CEO. Right? It's a massive grift, and the Democrats have been completely complicit in that. With that same money, you could have paid universal basic income for every homeless person in the state of California, $25,000 per person, including the children, and it would come out cheaper than the $25 billion we paid. That would literally put every single homeless person in the state of California above the national poverty threshold. Now, we know that's not the poverty threshold in California, because you can be broke making 75 grand in California for sure.
It's crazy. People try to say that that's not the case, but it's so expensive.
It's decidedly the case. But the point is that money would be better spent if it was going to actually meet the basic need rather than first having corporations or NGOs take a cut.
Well, so
I'll stop there. I agree with his principle that, yes, when it comes to homeless spending, it is a major grift. We call it the homeless industrial complex on this show because of the fact that people make so much money off of this, and developers make so much money, and they make these huge contracts, and then you have heads of nonprofits and NGOs who make $400,000 to $500,000 a year. He's right there. He is right there. I don't agree with his whole let's just give out free government money to everybody and give $25,000 in universal health care. But again, that's sort of his like, I agree in principle, and then all of a sudden he comes out with the statist solution, and I'm like, nope, you lost me.
So then
did you have a thought?
No, I agree with you. I mean, we constantly talk about this. It's like the state creates an issue, and then all the people are like, we need more state to fix the issue. And what? No, we don't. This is the opposite. We need the opposite. So yeah, you can continue.
Argument against what you're saying now from a political strategy standpoint is they would say, well, do you want fascism? Right? Because that's the other choice that people are saying. That's what they would say. It's like, oh, you're right? It's like, oh, if you don't vote for Katie Porter, oh, then you get some crazy dude, and then people are getting rounded up. Do you want that? That's what I think the Democrats would always go to, is that, well, yeah, that's not ideal that we just wasted $25 billion, but do you?
But Trump, but the other guys, and so that's the beauty of what's about to happen in this gubernatorial election. So that argument is going to be off the table for them for the following reason. So teams red and blue try to rig the system so that it's always a Democrat versus a Republican, and the Dems definitely want that in the state of California because the Republican.
Well, not necessarily, because in California they've rigged it so that seems like it's always Democrat versus Democrat with the jungle primary. It's not always Democrat versus Republican, so that's not true. I like that they kind of go off the whole, well, you have to vote for Katie Porter. I mean, she's the most logical sense. And I'm like, is she the most logical? We people who tune into the show know our feelings about Katie Porter. If she ever wants to come on the show and kind of defend her position, she's more than welcome to. But I doubt she would. Who knows? Crazier things have happened.
Well, remember, the Democrats do stick together. If
They do.
Katie, they tend to stick together in the sense of like Katie Porter is the front runner. I don't know if she's the front runner for the Democrats, but she's the biggest name right now. I mean, now we've got like Via Ragosa and this guy's joining in. I don't think this guy's going to really go anywhere, but we saw it after when Joe Biden clearly couldn't even physically or mentally even be on that debate stage, and yet they all stood by and were like, masterclass, he's a masterclass. And then when everyone's like, no, all of a sudden they switched, and Kamala Harris was then their person, and they all were like, oh yes, she's our best choice. Like, I mean, they went with it. So if the Democrats decide this is the guy, they're going to decide this is the guy. They're going to stick together, and this is going to be the guy. So I disagree with kind of what he says here. But
Republicans not winning, any major election anytime soon.
In California?
In California, inside the state of California.
I think it's impossible.
It's not impossible, but it's implausible. And let me explain why.
Please.
So the reason is that in the state of California, there are actually as many registered independents as there are registered Republicans. Mm-hmm. The state leans that far, I don't want to say left, but that far liberal.
But most of the independents voted for Trump in the presidential election. So who's to say that they wouldn't vote red in the California?
Because they're not going to have the choice. So this is the thing, is that teams red and blue engineered it so that it would just be a jungle primary, only the top two advance. If it's a Green Party candidate sitting in that second position, then what is Team Blue going to say? They can't fearmonger about the Republicans coming to power. And what does it take to get to second place? In 2022, the second place finisher in the gubernatorial election got 17.7% of the vote. There were 5.5 million votes cast. 1.29 million votes got them to second place. Get me 1.5 million votes, 1.7 million votes on June 2nd of 2026, and I'll break the Dems over my knee. I promise you.
Isn't that incorrect?
Well, I mean, I disagree with his math because he's saying, first off, you're with the Green Party, which I don't even know what the numbers for the Green Party are. But the fact that you're like, well, there's as many independents as there are Republicans. Okay, well, you don't think Republicans are going to vote for Republican candidates. Great. Independents are probably going to weigh in on theirs, whether it's split 50-50, and Democrats will show up and pick their person. He's assuming that, like, the independents are all going to break towards him. Like, I don't see the data that shows independents wildly breaking towards a radical Green Party socialist. Like that other host said, like, yeah, independents actually broke more in California for Trump. So I don't see in like 2 years, all of a sudden they're going to be like, oh, you know what? Screw Trump and that. Like, we're going to be full on socialist. Like, we're going to go farther left. I just don't get his math of where he thinks he's going to get 1.5 million votes. If Democrats are going to line up behind one person, there's going to be a Democratic convention. They're going to nominate somebody who is going to be, I guess they're going to throw their weight behind somebody. And then I'm sure they'll do the same with the Republicans. Like, they'll pick someone who they think everybody should rally behind. And then that will really be it, is like, okay, you have the two picks because you have those two camps with their established votes. I just don't really see, like, where does this dude get 1.5 million votes? Especially not from independents. Unless there's that many disenfranchised Democrats. Who knows? I mean, 50% of the electorate is Democrats. So maybe he picks up a good amount of disenfranchised Democrats. But you're running as a Green Party, like, I don't know how far you're going to go. Maybe he thought it wasn't worth it to run in the Democratic Party because you'd have to fight all the, big names like Anthony Villaraigosa and Katie Porter, and I guess Alex Padilla is now weighing, like, jumping into the race. So there's a lot of big money names, but
you keep cutting out, and I don't know if that's just for me.
Where did I lose you? Was it just cut out all over the place? Am I still here? Can people in the chat let me know if my
you're cutting it out?
Oh, People in the chat, let me know how my audio is going. We'll keep watching.
Because all of those independent and Republican voters will hear me banging on the corruption of the Democrats and saying we don't have to do this BS culture war that they've been trying to stage to keep you guys divided, because everybody in this state wants health care. Everybody in this state wants affordable housing. Nobody in this state wants Gavin Newsom's buddies taking a cut off at the top of their tax dollars before any social services get delivered.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I don't think that it's out of the question, though, that a Republican could win in the state of California because of what a horrible job Gavin Newsom has done and Karen Bass in L.A. And with this fire stuff continuing on, it's shined a big light on.
Well, they're gonna need better. They're gonna need better Republicans because
I mean, if Caitlyn Jenner,
Bianco or whatever his name is,
I mean, it'd have to be Caitlyn J. And
she ain't winning nothing. And I'll tell you this.
What do you think about? I think she's a big Caitlyn.
All right, that's enough of that. To kind of go off on Caitlyn Jenner. So,
is Caitlyn running?
No, Caitlyn's not running. She ran in the recall, but she's not running now.
I was confused. I was like, is this an old interview? No, this is recent. What?
Somebody said, does this guy have a man bun? Next. That's Butch Ware. I thought it was interesting because he's so off the, I guess, off the political spectrum that we're used to hearing with Democrats and Republicans. And again, there's a lot of frustration with obviously the ruling class in California, and the Democrats are not doing a great job, but there are points he says, like, people fearmonger into voting for Democrats and continually putting corporate Democrats like Katie Porter, like Scott Wiener, like all these people into office. Because, like, well, the alternative is fascism. It's like, is that a real argument, or is it just an argument to keep you in power? But I don't see him getting that far in the gubernatorial race at all. But he could tap into that frustration. I mean, crazier things have happened. They're going to have an avowed communist be the mayor of New York City pretty soon. So, you got Mamdani on the rise. Maybe there is kind of room for a far left socialist to make room. He may not win, but he may make inroads. But I don't think he'll win, but I think there could be room for disenfranchised Democrats to go look for that. So what are your thoughts on Butch Ware, Dr. Butch Ware?
Oh, yeah, he said a couple intelligent things, and then he mostly just lost me. But he's welcome to come on the show too. Talk more about his ideas,
We like to keep an open platform if anybody wants to come on and talk.
Yeah, we've been discussing having more people on who we don't necessarily agree with, because we want to say that we are fair and open-minded. And so I don't want to scare anyone, but, anyone that we bring on the show is not an endorsement. We don't endorse any candidates. So whether right or left or in the middle, if we do bring on someone in the future that you guys are like, what? We're just, we're trying to learn. We're trying to hear another side to the story that we may totally 100% disagree with, but at least we're allowing people to come on and tell us why we shouldn't vote for them. So
come on and defend your policies. It's not, we're not going to give you a cupcake interview. We want to make it a platform, so if anybody wants to come on, they can come on. We may not agree with you, and we may push back and maybe an uncomfortable interview or guest spot, but so that was Butch Ware. Any other final thoughts before we finish up? Thanks to everybody for the chat is going wild. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Everybody in the chat, keeping it active. I've been watching all you people chatting. Somebody says the word Democrat is a polite way of saying socialism. Okay, maybe in California. And long gone are the days of blue dog Democrats and stuff like that. So one more thing about housekeeping. Next week we will be off, or maybe, I don't know if we feel compelled to do maybe a Thursday night episode because the State of the State came out. So maybe we do the State of the State on Thursday and we talk about it then. But regardless, Tuesday night next week, there will be no live show, but we'll let you know if it moves to Thursday. I think that's basically it for the show. So for all those who tuned in and those who are listening, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, review, even on audio. So if you're on audio, if you're on Spotify or Apple or anything like that, you like listening to the audio show, reviewing does help. So if you give us a great review, like a 5-star review, that helps push us up in the audio rankings for Spotify audio, Apple, Google, all that stuff. And all those who show up on YouTube, make sure you like, share, subscribe. The subscriber has been crazy. It's great to see the growth on YouTube. We were like at 2,300 at the beginning of June, and now it's up to over 12,000. So it's just been like gangbusters. It's been a lot of fun, especially with the gubernatorial election coming up next year. So we're going to have a lot of stuff going on. All right. With that said, make sure, I already told you to make sure you like, share, subscribe, review, and all that stuff. If you want to support the show, that is 100% free. You can share it with somebody else. If you want to support the show by buying a nice mug that says, you know, political affiliation, Democrat, Republican, tear it all down, start all over. That's become sort of our motto.
I just want to say real quick, follow California Underground on Instagram as well, because that's where he makes most of the announcements and polls and stuff.
And Camille. And Camille's also on Instagram. So follow our usernames are right here on the side. So make sure you follow us there.
We're very active on there.
Yeah, we post a lot of news. We post our thoughts and stuff like that throughout the week, like keeping you updated and stuff like that. So, and on X, we're on X too. So with that said, guess we'll see you on the next one. Later.